We continue in Luke's gospel this morning, so may God give us the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Luke 8:40 through 56. Hear the word of the Lord. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Just then there came a man named Jairus, a leader of the synagogue, and he fell at Jesus' feet and began pleading with him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. And as he went, the crowds pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all she had on physicians, no one could cure her. And she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. Then Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" And when they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I noticed that power had gone out from me." And when the woman realized that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." But while he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer." When Jesus heard this, he replied, "Do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be saved." And when he came to the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was weeping and grieving for her, but he said, "Do not cry, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called out, "Child, get up." And her spirit returned, and she stood up at once, and he directed them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he ordered them to tell no one what had happened. This is the word of the Lord. 12 years is a very long time. 12 is an important number in Scripture. You see it all over the place. The 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples, the 12 baskets of bread that are collected after the feeding of the 5,000. And here in this story, 12 years. Luke wants us to see here that this bleeding woman, she has been sick for as long as Jairus' daughter has been alive. 12 years is a long time. The ancient Jewish purity laws from Leviticus 15 meant that this bleeding woman, she would have been considered ritually unclean. And so she wouldn't have been allowed to participate in worship and in the normal life of her community. This ritual exclusion, it was always the case for women during their monthly menstruation. But imagine 12 years of that. 12 years. Outside. Untouched, unwelcome, and unable to get well. No matter what she tried, no matter what doctor she visited, nothing could be done to help her. Now, Jairus, on the other hand, he's right at the center of his community. He's the synagogue leader, and so he's well known and well respected, and he's always included. But his only child, his 12-year-old daughter, she's dying. And so, no matter what he's tried, and no matter what doctor he's visited, nothing could be done to help him either. And so you have two folks here who are desperate for the healing touch of God. And Luke tells us that Jairus, he throws himself at the feet of Jesus, throws himself on the ground, and just begs Jesus to heal his daughter's life. He says, "If you'll just lay her hands on her, if you'll put your hands on her, she'll be fine, she'll be healed." And this bleeding woman, yet she doesn't have anybody to beg on her behalf. But she clearly thinks the same thing. Because Luke tells us she's thinking, if I can just touch him, I'll be healed. These two folks, they come from really different experiences, but their suffering, their desperation for Jesus, it is the great equalizer. They're the same on this day. They have everything in common. And they both risk quite a bit to get to Jesus. By this point in Jesus' ministry, there was a serious and growing rift between the religious leaders and Jesus. And so Jairus, you need to know, this synagogue leader, he would have been under immense pressure to be highly critical of Jesus and to ultimately reject Jesus, as all of his colleagues were doing. But Jairus is desperate, and he's heard rumor that all these people in the crowds, they keep getting healed. And his only daughter's dying. So risking his job, risking his reputation, it says he's waiting on the edge of the water that day with the crowds. He's standing there with everybody else, and the second Jesus gets off that boat, he throws himself on the ground and begs, "Please follow me home." And Jesus does. But this bleeding woman, she's just as desperate. But she's going to bravely take the posture of a street cat, really. She's going to sneak around, squeezing between the people in the crowd, creeping up behind Jesus. And as he begins to walk away with Jairus, while remaining invisible, she's going to reach out and just for a second, grab the edge of his cloak. Have you ever been desperate like these folks are? I mean, properly desperate? Not just like at the end of your rope, but your rope ran out a while ago. Your rope is long gone. You've tried everything you can do. You've called in every expert you can think of. You've spent everything you have, and still, no matter what you did, you couldn't fix what was broken. Maybe it was your marriage, or your career. Maybe it was your kid. Maybe it was your health. All sorts of things get us there. I've been there a number of times in my life. And that feeling of desperation, of being completely out of options, facing the realization that I can't really do anything to control what happens. I can't fix it. That feeling is like nothing else, is it? So trying to hold on to hope that God is still paying attention, trying to even sort of know what to pray, can be hard. Even believing, I think, can feel overwhelming in these moments. In the middle of one such season of our family's life, I ended up latching on to this song by Mumford & Sons that's called "The Ghosts That We Knew." It's really a prayer crying out for anything. And the chorus goes like this: "So give me hope in the darkness that I will see the light. Because, oh, that gave me such a fright. But I will hold as long as you like. Just promise me we'll be all right. Just promise me we'll be all right." And as this woman, she grabs hold of Jesus' robe, Luke tells us that she's immediately healed, and she knows it. She can feel the difference. But so can Jesus. And so he stops. He stops. He refuses to move. And he says, "Who touched me?" And his disciples are like, "Everybody is touching you." What are you talking about? Now, if you're Jairus right now, you're probably on the verge of losing your mind, right? Because you're in a hurry. He's got to be thinking, oh, Rabbi, please keep walking. Can we please keep moving? Like, now is not the time for an investigation on who touched you. Like, my daughter's life is hanging in the balance. Please keep walking. But this woman, she realized what's happened, and she's not going to be able to slip away, and so she comes trembling and bows before Jesus, and she tells him and everybody else that's listening exactly what happened to her. And Jesus, he's not upset. He's not in a hurry. He's got all the time in the world. And he just slows down to reassure her. And he says, daughter, you're going to be all right. Your faith has made you well. You can go in peace. And do you see what it is that Jesus is doing here when he calls this woman daughter? It's pretty important. He's just elevated this woman who's been outcast from society, who's laying in the ground at his feet, to the very same level of importance as Jairus' daughter, who has everyone worried about her and looking after her. Because one person mattering more than another is simply not something Jesus will ever agree to. A scarcity mindset that thinks there's like only a small amount of goodness and only a little bit of healing, there's not really enough to go around. Yeah, no. No, Jesus slows down long enough to make sure that we all can see that there is enough healing for all of us, that we're all beloved daughters, that we're all beloved sons. There's enough goodness for everybody. And then to drive that point home, word comes that Jairus' daughter has died. And Jairus has got to be thinking, well, great, now it's too late. You didn't get there in time. You didn't make it. And as thrilled as I am for this woman that's been healed, and I am equally grieved for Jairus. Because this woman's interruption, it seems like it's cost his daughter's life. And even more heartbreaking is he wasn't even by her bedside when she died. He wasn't there. He was standing in the street watching somebody else get healed. And when you're desperate, that's just too much. But even still, Jesus says to Jairus, don't you dare lose hope. Just keep walking. Just keep following me and believe. There's healing for all who need it. And when they arrive at Jairus' house, sure enough, she has died. All the professional mourners, they're there. They're weeping. They're preparing the girl for burial. But Jesus isn't fazed at all. He simply tells them to leave, that they surely must be mistaken because there is not a little girl that needs to be buried today. She's not dead, she's sleeping. And then he takes this little girl's hand, and another daughter is healed and brought to new life. You know, I don't know who needs to hear this today, but God has not forgotten you. God has not forgotten your desperation. Your pain is seen by Jesus. Even if there have been enough interruptions to make you start to lose hope. You know, I cannot pretend to understand like God's divine timing in our lives. I can't. Why, as Pastor Craig Barnes puts it, Jesus often seems to show up just after the nick of time. I don't know. Why do some people get healed and some don't? Why does, for some folks, it takes years and years of suffering and struggle? And then sometimes all it takes is grabbing the edge of a cloak. I don't know. I will not stand up here in front of you and pretend to know or understand what that's about. I don't understand it in my own life either. I don't. I just know that when everything is swirling, everything feels like it's off the rails, it is then that we have to root ourselves in the faith to which we cling, that reminds us that there is actually enough goodness to go around, that there is enough healing for us all, and that God promises us that in the end, our pain, no matter how many times our healing has been interrupted, that our pain is not the end of the story. Scripture promises us that in the end, God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. See, I am making all things new, Christ declares. And so sometimes the only prayer that makes any sense when you're desperate like this, friends, is God, I will hold on as long as you like. Just promise we'll be all right. Just promise me again we will be all right.